Have you ever heard about the Hoia-Baciu forest in Romania? It's a very creepy place near Cluj-Napoca, and people call it the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. The stories from there are wild. It's like something straight out of a horror movie. So the first thing you should know is that the forest has this really strange vibe. It's dense and overgrown, and the trees are all twisted and bent in unnatural ways. They look like they're frozen mid-scream. Even in the daytime, it feels like the forest is watching you, and at night, forget it. It's pitch black, and people say you can feel this heavy, oppressive energy all around you. But what really makes the forest famous, or infamous I guess, is this random clearing right in the middle of it. Nothing grows there. Not a single tree, bush, or even grass. It's just a big, barren circle of dirt, and no one knows why. Scientists have studied the soil and everything, but they can't find anything wrong with it. Some people think it's cursed, or maybe some kind of portal to another dimension. Others say it's where paranormal energy is strongest, like a beacon for all the weird things that happen there. And trust me, there's a lot of weird stuff. There's this story about a shepherd who went into the forest with his flock of 200 sheep, and they all just disappeared, completely vanished, never to be seen again. That's how the forest first got its reputation. Since then, people have reported seeing shadowy figures moving between the trees, or feeling like they're being watched, even when they're alone. Some say they've heard whispers or footsteps following them, but when they turn around, there's no one there. And there's the lights. This part really creeps me out. People often see these glowing orbs floating around the forest, especially at night. They're usually bright white or yellow, but sometimes they flash green or blue. They move in these weird random patterns like they're alive. And they don't act like any natural light you'd expect, like fireflies or reflections. In 1968, a guy named Emil Barnia, who was a military technician, actually took photos of what looked like a UFO hovering over the forest. These photos went viral, well, as viral as things could back then, and made the Hoia-Baciu forest famous around the world. People still point to those photos as proof that the forest might be connected to extraterrestrials. But it's not just lights and shadows that people talk about. A lot of visitors say their electronic devices go completely haywire when they're in the forest. Phones, cameras, GPS systems, none of them work right. Batteries drain super fast, compasses spin like crazy, and sometimes devices just shut off altogether. Some people even say they've felt time behaving strangely in the forest, like they lose track of it, or it speeds up or slows down. There are stories of people blacking out and waking up hours later with no memory of what happened while they were out. One of the most famous spots is, of course, that weird circular clearing. People say it's the heart of all the strange energy in the forest. Some paranormal investigators believe it's a hotspot for ghostly activity, while others think it's where UFOs might have landed, or where they still do. There's even a theory that it's a place where dimensions overlap, and that's why people experience such strange phenomena there. And let's not forget the legends. Locals have all kinds of stories about the forest being cursed. One says that centuries ago, villagers were murdered there, and their restless spirits still haunt the area. Another claims that people used the forest for dark rituals, and the energy of those rituals lingers to this day. There are even tales of children disappearing in the forest only to reappear years later without having aged a single day. Despite all this, the Hoia-Baciu forest has become a popular spot for thrill seekers and ghost hunters. There are guided tours now, where you can go and hear all the creepy stories while wandering through the twisted trees. Some people go looking for evidence of the paranormal, while others just want to experience the strange atmosphere for themselves. It's crazy to think that a place like this exists. There's no real explanation for all the things that happen there. Sure, some skeptics say it's just overactive imaginations or natural phenomena like magnetic fields messing with people's perceptions. But how do you explain the UFO sightings, or the missing time, or the clearing where nothing grows? Would you ever go to a place like that? Nestled along the banks of the Hudson River in New York, Sleepy Hollow is a quaint village with a reputation that far exceeds its size. This picturesque hamlet, steeped in colonial history, owes much of its fame to Washington Irving's 1820 short story. While the tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman is a work of fiction, it draws upon real places, people, and an enduring sense of mystery that has long haunted this serene corner of the Hudson Valley. But what if I told you that Sleepy Hollow's ghostly reputation isn't purely fictional? The stories that inspired Irving's legendary tale, as well as the eerie atmosphere that clings to the area, are very real. Long before Irving penned his story, the land that would become Sleepy Hollow was already considered a strange and bewitched place. The Native Americans who originally inhabited the area believed it to be sacred and home to spirits. When Dutch settlers arrived in the 17th century, they brought their own superstitions, and the land's eerie reputation only grew. One of the earliest ghost stories tied to the area comes from the Revolutionary War. During this time, the region saw its fair share of bloodshed, particularly near a spot known as the Old Dutch Church. Soldiers from both sides of the conflict were buried in and around the churchyard, which would later become the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. One such soldier was a Hessian mercenary who, according to legend, lost his head to a cannonball during battle. Some say his restless spirit still roams the village, searching for his head, a chilling inspiration for Irving's Headless Horseman. The Old Dutch Church itself, built in 1685, is one of the oldest churches in New York, and a focal point for many of Sleepy Hollow's ghostly tales. The adjacent burial ground is home to countless Revolutionary War soldiers, early settlers, and notable figures, including Washington Irving himself. Visitors to the church and cemetery often report strange occurrences. Shadows moving among the gravestones, inexplicable cold spots, and the faint sound of galloping hooves in the dead of night. Some claim to have seen a spectral figure dressed in 18th century garb riding a horse through the graveyard, a sight that has become synonymous with Sleepy Hollow's lore. Washington Irving didn't invent Sleepy Hollow's ghost stories, he merely immortalized them. Irving was a frequent visitor to the village and spent time gathering local legends. He wove these tales into his works, blending fact and fiction seamlessly. In the legend of Sleepy Hollow, he even used real landmarks, such as the Old Dutch Church and the Pocantico River, to ground his story in reality. Irving himself is buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, not far from the churchyard he wrote about. His grave has become a pilgrimage site for fans of his work, and for those drawn to the eerie charm of Sleepy Hollow. Today, Sleepy Hollow embraces its spooky reputation. Every October, the village transforms into a Halloween wonderland, with lantern-lit tours, haunted hayrides, and reenactments of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. But even outside the festive season, locals and visitors alike report strange experiences that suggest Sleepy Hollow's ghosts are more than just stories. The Old Dutch Church remains a hotspot for paranormal activity. Tour guides and visitors often report the sensation of being watched, hearing whispers that seem to come from nowhere, or seeing shadowy figures darting among the gravestones. The nearby Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, sprawling and atmospheric, is said to be equally active. One particularly chilling tale comes from a caretaker who worked at the cemetery in the early 20th century. He claimed to have seen a headless figure on horseback galloping down one of the cemetery paths late at night. When he went to investigate, there were no hoof prints, no signs of anyone or anything there. In Irving's story, the climactic chase between Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman ends at a bridge near the Old Dutch Church. Legend has it that the ghost can't cross water, and Ichabod believes he'll be safe if he can reach the other side. However, this bridge doesn't exist today. Over the years, the landscape has changed, and the exact location of the bridge is lost to time. Still, visitors to the area often claim to feel a strange energy near the Pocantico River, where the fictional bridge was said to be. Some even say they've heard phantom hoofbeats echoing through the trees at night. What makes Sleepy Hollow truly unique is how its history, folklore, and fiction are so tightly intertwined. While some of the village's ghost stories may have been embellished over the years, they're rooted in a real sense of mystery and unease that has surrounded the area for centuries. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying that Sleepy Hollow has an atmosphere unlike any other. Its misty hills, ancient churchyard, and timeless legends make it a place where the line between the living and the dead feels thin. So thin, in fact, that you might find yourself glancing over your shoulder wondering if that faint sound behind you is just the wind, or something more. If you ever find yourself in Sleepy Hollow, take a walk through its haunted cemetery, stand in the shadow of the Old Dutch Church and listen closely. Who knows? You just might hear the echo of galloping hooves in the distance. Nestled in southeastern Massachusetts, the Freetown-Fall River State Forest seems at first glance like any other stretch of New England wilderness. Spanning over 5,000 acres of dense trees, winding trails, and serene ponds, it's a haven for hikers, bikers, and nature enthusiasts. But for those who know its history, this forest holds a much darker reputation. This isn't just any forest, it's part of the Bridgewater Triangle, a 200 square mile area infamous for unexplained phenomena. UFO sightings, ghostly apparitions, cryptid encounters, and even sinister rituals have been reported here for decades. At the heart of this eerie region lies Freetown-Fall River State Forest, a place where reality and the supernatural seem to blur. The haunting of Freetown-Fall River State Forest isn't just rooted in folklore, it's tied to the land's history. Long before colonial settlers arrived, the area was home to the Wampanoag people. This forest was part of their sacred land, and it holds deep cultural and spiritual significance. However, during King Philip's War in the late 1600s, one of the bloodiest conflicts in American history, the Wampanoag people were brutally displaced and massacred. Some say the forest carries the lingering energy of that violence, a wound that has never healed. Over the years, the forest has become the site of modern tragedies as well. In the 1970s and 1980s, it was linked to several horrific crimes, including murders and alleged cult activity. The infamous Fall River cult, led by a man named Carl Drew, reportedly performed dark rituals in the forest, culminating in brutal killings that shocked the region. Even today, locals speak of a strange, oppressive feeling in certain parts of the forest, as if the air itself carries the weight of the violence and despair that have unfolded there. The forest has earned its reputation as a hotspot for the paranormal, with reports of ghostly encounters spanning decades. Visitors often speak of hearing disembodied voices, footsteps, and even blood-curdling screams in the dead of night. Some have seen shadowy figures darting between the trees only to vanish when approached. One of the most chilling legends is that of the Pukwudgies, small humanoid creatures from Wampanoag folklore. Described as mischievous and malevolent, these beings are said to lure unsuspecting travelers off the trails, leading them to danger, or worse. Some hikers have reported seeing glowing orbs of light, believed to be Pukwudgie tricks, floating deeper into the woods. Then there's the Hockomock Swamp, part of the larger Bridgewater Triangle and adjacent to the forest. Known as the place where spirits dwell, in Wampanoag lore, it's a place rife with tales of ghostly Native American warriors and spectral fires that appear on the swamp's surface. Many believe the swamp's proximity to the forest only amplifies its eerie energy. Freetown-Fall River State Forest isn't just known for ghost stories. It's also a hotspot for UFO sightings and encounters with strange creatures. The forest has been the site of numerous reports of bright, unexplainable lights darting across the night sky. These sightings often coincide with strange electromagnetic disturbances, with witnesses describing their compasses spinning wildly or their electronic devices malfunctioning. And then there are the cryptid stories. Bigfoot-like creatures have been reported in the forest, with some hikers claiming to have seen massive, hairy humanoid figures watching them from a distance. Others speak of unexplained howls echoing through the trees, sounds that seem far too deep and guttural to belong to any known animal in the area. One of the forest's most infamous spots is The Ledge, a towering cliff that overlooks a quarry. The views from the top are breathtaking, but the stories surrounding it are anything but. Visitors often report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread when approaching the edge, as if something unseen is urging them to jump. This sensation has led some to believe that the ledge is cursed or haunted by those who have tragically taken their lives there. Multiple suicides have occurred at this site, and witnesses have described ghostly apparitions standing at the edge or hovering just below the surface of the water. One particularly eerie tale involves a group of teenagers who visited the ledge on a dare. As they stood at the top, one of them claimed to hear a voice whispering his name, though no one else heard it. Seconds later he lost his balance and fell, but miraculously survived. He swore something had pushed him from behind, though his friends insisted no one was near him. Even those who don't believe in the paranormal often admit there's something unsettling about Freetown-Fall River State Forest. The sheer number of eerie encounters and tragic events tied to the forest make it a place where the line between myth and reality is razor thin. Locals warn visitors not to wander too far off the trails, not just because it's easy to get lost, but because you might encounter something you can't explain or escape. Despite its dark reputation, the forest continues to draw adventurers, paranormal investigators, and thrill seekers. Whether they're searching for ghosts, Pukwudgies, or UFOs, one thing is certain. Everyone who enters Freetown-Fall River State Forest comes away with a story to tell. Would you dare to walk among its shadowy trees knowing the haunted history that surrounds you? Thanks for watching. Good nightmares and stay scared.